Good welcome that I so we're here at our YouTube channel. Keep your eye out for our many upcoming events and our special theme for April. We'll open today with our opening words, which will appear on the slide behind you. Please listen as I read the words aloud or read them aloud along with me at home. We welcome you into the light of the gods and light this flame in celebration. May its brightness symbolize our connection to the gods and the natural world. May you join us in this community of faith, cherishing love and with open hearts. So our theme for this month is totalitarianism, and our readings today is part 1 of 2 of Plato's Republic, translated by Benjamin Jowett. I wanted to do some discussion this month, but unfortunately, due to the fact that Plato writes a lot, we will not be able to do that. But you will very much enjoy this section of his work. So we'll begin Plato's Republic. Then, like a wrestler, he replied, you must put yourself again in the same position and let me ask the same questions. And you give me the same answer which you were about to give me then. Yes, if I can, I will, I said. I shall particularly wish to hear what were the 4 constitutions that you were speaking of. That question, I said, is easily answered. The 4 governments of which I spoke, so far as they have distinct names, are first those of Crete and Sparta, which are generally applauded. What is termed oligarchy comes next. This is not equally approved, and is a form of government which teems with evils. Thirdly, democracy, which naturally follows oligarchy, although very different. And lastly comes tyranny, great and famous, which differs from them all, and is the 4th and worst disorder of a state. I do not know, do you, of any other constitution which can be said to have a distinct character. There are lordships and principalities which are bought and sold, and some other intermediate forms of government, but these are nondescripts and may be found equally among Hellenists and among barbarians. Which, by the way, barbarians is the word for foreigner, does not have the same connotation as it does today. Yes, he replied, we certainly hear of many curious forms of government which exist among them. Do you know, I said, that governments vary as the dispositions of men vary, and that there must be as many of the one as there are of the other. For we cannot suppose that states are made of oak and rock, and not out of the human natures which are in them, and which in a figure turn the scale and draw other things after them. Yes, he said, the states are as the men are. They grow out of human character. Then if the constitutions of the state are 5, the dispositions of the individual minds will also be 5. Certainly. Him who answers to aristocracy, and whom we rightly call just and good, we have already described. We have. Then let us now proceed to describe the inferior sort of natures, being the contentious and ambitious, who answer to the Spartan polity, also the oligarchical, the democratical, and the tyrannical. Let us place the most just by the side of the most unjust, and when we see them we shall be able to compare the relative happiness or unhappiness of him who leads a life of pure justice or pure injustice. The inquiry will then be complete, and we shall know whether we ought to pursue injustice as Thrasymachus advises, or in accordance with the conclusions of the argument to prefer justice. Certainly, he replied, we must do as you say. Shall we follow our old plan, which we adopted with a view to clearness of taking the state first, then proceeding to the individual, and begin with the government of honor? I know of no name for such a government other than timocracy or perhaps timarchy. We will compare the like character in the individual, and after consider oligarchy and the oligarchical man, and then we will turn our attention to democracy and the democratical man, and lastly we will go and view the city of tyranny, and once more take a look at the tyrant soul and try to arrive at a satisfactory decision. That way of viewing and judging the matter will be very suitable. First, then, I said, let us inquire how timocracy, the government of honor, arises out of aristocracy, the government of the best. Clearly all political changes originate in divisions of the actual governing power. A government which is united, however small, cannot be moved. Very true, he said. In what way, then, will our city be moved, and in what manner will the 2 classes of auxiliaries and rulers disagree amongst themselves or with one another? Shall we, after the manner of Homer, pray to the Muses to tell us how discord first arose? Shall we imagine them in solemn mockery to play and jest with us as if we were children, and to address us in a lofty tragic vein, making believe to be in earnest? How would they address us? After this manner, a city which is thus constituted can hardly be shaken. But seeing that everything which has a beginning also has an end, even a constitution such as yours will not last forever, but will in time be dissolved. And this is the dissolution. In plants that grow in the earth, as well as in animals that move on the earth's surface, fertility and sterility of soul and body occur when the circumference of the circles of each are completed, which in short-lived existences pass over a short space, and in long-lived ones over a long space. But to the knowledge of human fecundity and sterility all the wisdom and education of your rulers will not attain. The laws which regulate them will not be discovered by an intelligence which is alloyed with sense, but will escape them, and they will bring children into the world when they ought not. Now that which is of divine birth has a period which is contained in a perfect number, i.e. a cyclical number such as 6, which is equal to the sum of its divisors 1, 2, and 3. So when the circle or time represented by 6 is completed, the lesser times or rotations represented by 1, 2, and 3 are also completed. But the period of human birth is comprehended in the number in which first increments by involution and evolution, or squared and cubed, obtaining 3 intervals and 4 terms of like and unlike, waxing and waning numbers, make all the terms consumable and agreeable to one another. Probably the numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6, of which the first 3 equal the sides of the Pythagorean triangle, and the terms will then be 3 cubed, 4 cubed, and 5 cubed, which together equals 6 cubed, 216. The base of these, with a third added, when combined with 5, and raised to the third power, furnishes 2 harmonies. The first a square, which is 100 times as great, 400 equals 4 times 100, or the first square, which is 100 times 100 equals 10,000. The whole number will then be 17,500, equal a square of 100, and an oblong of 100 by 75. And the other figure having one equal side to the former but oblong, consisting of 100 numbers squared upon rational diameters of a square, i.e. omitting fractions, the side of which is 5, 7 times 7 equals 49 times 100 equals 4,900, each of them being by 1 less than the perfect square, which includes the fractions, or less by constituting 2 numbers upon irrational diameters, example 100. 2 perfect squares of irrational diameters, and 100 cubes of 3. Now this number represents a geometrical figure which has control over the good and evil of births. For when your guardians are ignorant of the laws of births and unite bride and bridegroom out of season, the children will not be goodly or fortunate. And though only the best of them will be appointed by their predecessors, they will still be unworthy to hold their father's places, and when they come into power as guardians, they will soon be found to fail in taking care of us. The muses, first by undervaluing music, will neglect soon extend to gymnastics, and hence the young man of your state will be less cultivated. In the succeeding generation, rulers will be appointed who have lost the guardian power of testing the metal of your different races, which, like Hesiod's, are of gold, silver, brass, and iron. And iron will be mingled with silver and brass and with gold, and hence there will arise dissimilarity and inequality and irregularity, which always and in all places are causes of hatred and war. This the muses affirm to be the stock from which discord has sprung whenever arising, and this is their answer to us. Yes, when we may assume that they answer truly. Why, yes, I said, of course they answer truly. How can the muses speak falsely? And what do the muses say next? When discord arose, then the 2 races were drawn different ways. The iron and brass fell to acquiring money, and land and houses, and gold and silver. But the gold and silver races, not wanting money, but having the true riches in their own nature, inclined towards virtue in the ancient order of things. There was a battle between them, and at last they agreed to distribute their land and houses among individual owners, and they enslaved their friends and maintainers, whom they had formerly protected in the condition of free men, and made them subjects and servants, and they themselves were engaged in war and in keeping watch against them. I believe you have rightly conceived the origin of the change. This is a separate note just for me. If you're unclear what he was talking about, what he was saying was there are cycles in life based off of these numbers and how these numbers work. And when these numbers shift, the generations will get weaker and weaker as time goes on, and this will eventually lead to the rise of different forms of government that are not as perfect as the one he imagines before. And if you are unfamiliar with that form of government, please check our previous videos which cover that form. And the new government which thus arises will be a form intermediate between oligarchy and aristocracy. Very true. Such will be the change, and after the change has been made, how will they proceed? Clearly, the new state, being in a mean between oligarchy and the perfect state, will partly follow one and partly the other, and will also have some peculiarities. True, he said. In the honor given to rulers and the abstinence of the warrior class from agriculture, handicrafts, and trade in general, in the institution of common meals, and in the attention paid to gymnastics and military training, in all these respects this state will resemble the former. True, but inferior to admitting philosophers to power because they are no longer to be had simple and earnest, but are made of mixed elements, and in turning from them to passionate and less complex characters, who are, by nature, fitted for war rather than peace, and in the value set up by them upon military stratagems and contrivances, and in the waging of everlasting wars, this state will be for the most part peculiar. Yes, I said, and men of this stamp will be covetous of money, like those who live in oligarchies. They will have a fierce secret longing after gold and silver, which they will hoard in dark places, having magazines and treasures of their own for the deposit and concealment of them, also castles which are just for their eggs, and in which they will spend large sums on their wives, or on any others whom they please. That is most true, he said, and they are miserly because they have no means of openly acquiring the money which they prize. They will spend that which is another man's on the gratification of their desires, stealing their pleasures and running away like children from the law. Their father, they have been schooled not by the gentle influences, but by force, for they have neglected her who is the true muse, the companion of reason and philosophy, and have honored gymnastic more than music. Undoubtedly, he said. The form of government which you describe is a mixture of good and evil. Why, there is a mixture, I said, but one thing, and one thing is predominantly seen, the spirit of contention and ambition, and these are due to the prevalence of passion or spirit element. Assuredly, he said. Such is the origin and character of this state, which has been described in outline only. The more perfect execution was not required, for sketch has enough to show the type of the most perfectly just and most perfectly unjust, and to go all the states and all the characters of men, omitting none, would be a truly interminable labor. Very true, he replied. Now what man answers to this form of government? How did he come into being, and what is he like? I think, said Adeimantus, that the spirit of contention which characterizes him is not unlike our friend Glaucon. Perhaps, I said, he may be like him in that one point, but there are other respects in which he is very different. In what respects? He should have more of self-assertion and be less cultivated, and yet a friend of culture, and he should be a good listener but no speaker. Such a person is apt to be rough with slaves, unlike the educated man who is too proud for that, and he will be courteous to free men and remarkably obedient to authority. He is a lover of power and a lover of honor, claiming to be a ruler, not because he is eloquent or on any ground of that sort, because he is a soldier and performs feats of arms. He is a lover of gymnastics exercises and of the chase. Yes, that is the type of character which answers to timocracy. Such a one will despise riches only when he is young, but as he gets older he will be more and more attracted to them, because he has a piece of a various nature in him, and is not single-minded towards virtue, having lost his best guardian. What is that? Said Adeimantus. Philosophy, I said, tempered with music, who comes and takes her abode in man, and is the only savior of virtue throughout life. Good, he said. Such, I said, is the timocratical youth, and he is like the timocratical state. Exactly. His origin is as follows. He is often the young son of a brave father who dwells in an ill-governed city, of which he declines the honors and offices, and will not go into law or exert himself in any way, but is ready to waive his rights in order that he may escape trouble. And how does the son come into being? The character of the son begins to develop when he hears his mother complaining that her husband has no place in government, of which the consequence is that she has no precedence among other women. Further, when she sees her husband not very eager about money, and instead battling and railing in the law courts or assembly, taking whatever happens to him quietly, and when she observes that his thoughts always center in himself, while he treats her with very considerable indifference, she is annoyed, and says to her son that his father is only half a man and far too easygoing, adding all other complaints about her own ill treatment which women are so fond of rehearsing. Yes, said Mantus, they give us plenty of them, and their complaints are so like themselves. And you know, I said, that the old servants also, who are supposed to be attached to the family, from time to time talk privately in the same strain to the son. And if they see anyone who owes money to his father, or is wronging him in any way, and fails to prosecute them, they tell the youth that when he grows up he must retaliate upon people of this sort, and be more of a man than his father. He has only to walk abroad, and he hears and sees the same sort of thing. Those who do their own business in the city are called simpletons, and held in no esteem, while the busy bodies are honored and applauded. The result is that the young man, hearing and seeing all these things, hearing too the words of his father, and having a nearer view of his way of life, and making comparisons of him and others, is drawn opposite ways. While his father is watering and nourishing the rational principle in his soul, the others are encouraging the passionate and appetitive, and he, being not originally of a bad nature, but having kept bad company, is at last brought to their joint influenced middle point, and gives up the kingdom which is within him to the middle principle of conscientiousness and passion, and becomes arrogant and ambitious. You seem to have described his origin perfectly. Then we have now, I said, the second form of government and the second type of character. We have. Next let's look at another man who, as Aeschylus says, is set over against another state, or rather, as our plan requires, begin with the state, by all means. I believe that oligarchy follows next in order. In what manner of government do you term oligarchy? A government resting on a valuation of property, in which the rich have power and the poor man is deprived of it. I understand, he replied. Ought I not begin by describing how the change from timocracy to oligarchy arises? Yes. Well, I said, no eyes are required in order to see how one passes into the other. How? The accumulation of gold in the treasury of private individuals is the ruin of democracy. They invent illegal modes of expenditure, for what do they or their wives care about the law? Yes, indeed. And then one, seeing another grow rich, seeks to rival him, and thus the great mass of citizens become lovers of money, likely enough. And so they grow richer and richer, and the more they think of making a fortune, the less they think of virtue. For when riches and virtue are placed together into scales of balance, the one always rises as the other falls. True. And in proportion as riches and rich men are honored in the state, virtue and the virtuous are dishonored. Clearly. And what is honored is cultivated, and what has no honor is neglected. That is obvious. So at last, instead of loving contention and glory, men become lovers of trade and money. They honor and look up to the rich man, and make a ruler of him, and dishonor the poor. They do so. They next proceed to make a law which fixes a sum of money as the qualification of citizenship. The sum is higher in one place and lower in another, as oligarchy is more or less exclusive, and they allow no one whose property falls below the amount fixed to have any share in the government. These changes in the constitution they effect by force of arms, if intimidation has not already done their work. Very true. And this, speaking generally, is the way in which oligarchy is established. Yes, he said, but what are the characteristics of this form of government, and what are the defects of which we are speaking? First of all, I said, consider the nature of the qualification. Just think what would happen if pilots were to choose according to their property, and a poor man would refuse permission to steer, even though he was a better pilot. You mean they would shipwreck? Yes, and is not this true of the government of anything? I should imagine so. Except a city, or would you include a city? Nay, he said, the case of a city is the strongest of all, inasmuch as the rule of a city is the greatest and most difficult of all. This, then, will be the first great defect of oligarchy, clearly. And there is another defect which is quite bad. Which defect? The inevitable division. Such a state is not one, but two states, the one of the poor and the other of rich men, and they are living on the same spot, always conspiring against one another. That surely is at least as bad. Another discreditable feature is that, for a like reason, they are incapable of carrying on any war. Either they arm the multitude, and then they are more afraid of them than the enemy, or if they do not call them out in the hour of battle, they are oligarchs indeed, few to fight, and they are few to rule. and at the same time their fondness for money makes them unwilling to pay taxes. How discreditable! And as we said before, under such a constitution, the same persons have too many callings. They are husbandmen, tradesmen, warriors, all in one. Does that look well? Anything but well. And there is another evil, which is perhaps the greatest of all, and to which this state begins to be liable. What evil? A man may sell all that he has, and another may acquire his property. Yet after the sale he may dwell in the city of which he is no longer a part, being neither trader nor artisan, nor horseman nor hoplite, but only a poor helpless creature. Yes, that is an evil which also begins in this state. The evil is certainly not prevented there, for oligarchies have both the extremes of great wealth and utter poverty. True, but think again. In his wealthy days, while he was spending his money, he was a man of a sort of wit, more good for the state of the purposes of citizenship. Or did he only seem to be a member of the ruling body, although in truth he was neither ruler nor subject, but just a spendthrift? As you say, he seemed to be a ruler, but was only a spendthrift. May we not say that this is the drone in the house who is like the drone in the honeycomb, and that the one is the plague of the city, as the other is of the hive? Just so, Socrates. And God has made the flying drones, Adamantus, all without stings, whereas of the walking drones he has made some without stings, but others have dreadful stings. Of the stingless case are those who in their old age end as paupers. Of the stingers come all the criminal class, as they are termed. Most true, he said. Clearly, then, whenever you see paupers in a state, somewhere in that neighborhood there are hidden away thieves, and cut purses, and robbers of temples, and all sorts of malefactors. Clearly. Well, I said, and in oligarchical states do you not find paupers? Yes, he said, nearly everybody is a pauper who is not a ruler. And may we be so bold as to affirm that there are also many criminals to be found in them, rogues who have stings, and whom the authorities are careful to restrain by force? Certainly we may be so bold. The existence of such persons is to be attributed to want of education, ill training, and an evil constitution of the state. True. Such then is the form, and such are the evils of oligarchy. And there may be many other evils, very likely. Then oligarchy, in the form of government, in which the rulers are elected for their wealth, may now be dismissed. Let us next proceed to consider the nature and origin of the individual who answers to the state. By all means. Does not the timocratical man change into the oligarchical on this wise? How? A time arrives when the representative of democracy has a son. At first he begins by emulating his father and walking in his footsteps, but presently he sees him of a sudden foundering against the state as upon a sunken reef, and all that he has is lost. He may have been a general or some other high officer, is brought to trial under prejudice raised by informers, and either put to death or exiled or deprived of privileges and all his property taken. Nothing more likely. And the son has seen and known all this. He is a ruined man, and his fear has taught him to knock ambition and passion head foremost from his bosom's throne. Humbled by poverty, he takes to money-making, and mean and miserly savings, and hard work gets a fortune together. It is not It is not such a one likely to seat the concupiscent and covetous element on the vacant throne, and to suffer it to play with the great king within him, girt with a tiara and chain and scimitar? Most true, he said. And when he has made reason and spirit sit down on the ground obediently on either side of their sovereign, and taught them to know their place, he compels the one to think only of how lesser sums may be turned into larger ones, and will not allow the other to worship and admire anything but riches and rich men, or to be ambitious of anything so much as the acquisition of wealth and the means of acquiring it. Of all changes, he said, there is none so speedy or so sure as the conversion of the ambitious youth into the avaricious one. And the avaricious, I said, is the oligarchical youth. Yes, he said, at any rate, the individual out of whom he came is like the state out of which oligarchy came. Let us then consider whether there is any likeness between them. Very good. First, then, they resemble one another in the value which they set upon wealth. Certainly. Also in their penurious, laborious character. The individual only satisfies his necessary appetites and confines his expenditure to them. His other desires he subdues under the idea that they are unprofitable. True. He's a shabby fellow who saves something out of everything and makes a purse for himself, and this is the sort of man whom the vulgar applaud. Is he not the true image of the state which he represents? He appears to me to be so. At any rate, money is highly valued by him as well as by the state. You see, he is not a man of cultivation, I said. I imagine not, he said. Had he been educated, he would never have made a blind god director of his course, or given him chief honor. Excellent, I said. Yet, consider, we must not further admit that owing to this want of cultivation, there will be found in him drone-like desires as of pauper and rogue, which are forcibly kept down by his general habit of life. True. Do you know where you will have to look if you want to discover his rogueries? Where must I look? You should see him where he has some great opportunity of acting dishonestly, as in the guardianship of an orphan. Aye, it will be clear enough then that in his ordinary dealings, which give him a reputation for honesty, he coerces his bad passions by an enforced virtue, not making them see that they are wrong, or taming them by reason, but by necessity and fear constraining them, because he trembles for his possessions, to be sure. Yes, indeed, my dear friend, you will find that the natural desires of the drone commonly exist in him, all the same whenever he has to spend what is not his own. Yes, and they will be strong in him too. The man then will be at war with himself. He will be two men and not one, but in general his better desires will be found to prevail over his inferior ones. True. For these reasons such an one will be more respectable than most people. Yet the true virtue of a unanimous and harmonious soul will flee far away and should never come near him. I should expect so. And surely the miser individually will be an ignoble competitor in a stage for any prize of victory or other object of honorable ambition. He will not spend his money in the contest for glory, so afraid is he of awakening his expensive appetites and inviting them to help and join the struggle. In true oligarchical fashion, he fights with a small part only of his resources, and the result commonly is that he loses the prize and saves his money. Very true. Can we any longer doubt, then, that the miser and the moneymaker answers to the oligarchical state? There can be no doubt. All right, that is the end of our myth reading for today. And I wanted to have a discussion, but that was much longer than I anticipated. We have the second part that goes over democracy and tyranny for the next observance. So I will now play the ritual video, and we can all enjoy. We leave this offering for our gods to symbolize our connection and devotion. We gift this rock to symbolize the stability of the gods in our world. We gift this water to accept the flow of our lives. We welcome life and bless our offerings with oil to share our riches. I will now read the closing words. We embrace our connection to each other and the world and celebrate our revival. As we move out into the world, let us remember our community of faith. Cherish love and open your heart as you walk through life. Hold dear the light of the gods and our connection with the natural world. Go forth in celebration and carry the light of connection within your hearts. I will stop the recording and we can all have coffee hour.